to the Daft Souls podcast. Today I am joined by just one other person, but it's a good one. It's Miss Philippa Watt.
Hello.
How you doing, Pip?
I'm good, thank you. I finished my tax return and now I feel invincible.
I know, right? I did mine the week before. It's like the hardest game in the world.
I feel so smug as well because it's days before the deadline, whole days.
I know, you give them the money, then they leave you alone, but you just have to go through lots of terrifying boxes and select things you don't understand what is going on.
I kind of don't mind. There's only a few boxes that I don't quite understand, but I feel like I can take enough of an educated, I think I know what this means to pick the yes or the no. So
it's good. It is definitely like lifting all of the weights off of your mind, though. But
I know, right? I can imagine that if ever your living situation gets more complicated and you need more of the pages, then suddenly that's why it starts to be terrifying. But at the moment, mine is just not terrifying.
Yeah, I'm
just
self-employed,
put the numbers
so I've
in
done all of the pages, and it was maddening, but it was fun. And in case you're wondering, this is the tax return special of the Daft Souls podcast. No, we're going to talk about some video games.
We've actually been playing budget sims.
Yeah. Oh my god, I did actually think about buying You Need a Budget on Steam.
Yeah.
But then I realised actually it wasn't really that useful. It was sort of more about how to be not bad at spending your money rather than actually keeping financial documents and records, which is weirdly what I'm more interested in.
I have a spreadsheet.
Yeah, I've got multiple spreadsheets. Honestly, I've gone from being can't do organisational things to being actually an incredibly well organised person. Yeah, I kind of have to be when you're running everything on your own, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still technically freelance, so yeah, I'm in the same boat, and so spreadsheets.
God, we should stop talking about this before this stops being a joke and starts becoming an actual podcast about tax returns.
And possibly a self-help seminar. We could do lectures. We could do a touring kind of seminar series that makes everybody not afraid of their tax return.
Yeah, don't be afraid. You're only a Google away from working out what the hell that means or whether or not you should need to tick that box. It's fine.
So basically, you'll be fine. Well done, you.
Congratulations. So that's our review of taxes. You just see me playing a bit of a video game, actually, though, because it's a video game which has a bit of an unreliable saving system. It just doesn't let you save, it just saves it at a time. So I was getting to a point where I felt like the game had gone, okay. And that game is Oxenfree.
Yes.
Which I was worried I was spoiling it, but luckily you've already played it and reviewed it, which means you've played it more than I have. It's good, isn't it?
Yes, I really, really, really like it, actually. And
it's got a weird name. It kind of sounds like it's going to be like a kind of salt and fat-free stock cube.
Isn't it? I should totally have looked this up in case it was super relevant. But the only time I've heard anyone say Oxenfree was Macklemore in his song Downtown.
What is it?
So I don't know. Shall we Google it? Yeah. Is that a thing? Because we can do that, right?
Yeah, I mean, we can do that. We can totally do that. I'm just amazed because I was sort of just thinking Oxenfree, weird name for a game, but I was sitting there thinking, well, yeah, but there'll come a point when obviously I'll understand, but you've obviously finished it and you still don't know why it's called Oxenfree, which is kind of weird.
Oh no, it's all Oxenfree reviews.
Yeah, your review is top of the list.
Oh.
That's fantastic. It's like the top of Google.
Okay.
Ollie Ollie Oxenfree.
Yes.
Which is
a catchphrase used in such children's games as hide and seek, capture the flag. Is capture the flag a children's game?
Not in my mind, no.
Or kick the can.
Maybe capture the flag is like an American name for something
like a kind of tag type thing. Maybe
that would make sense where it came from, I guess.
Or maybe they just have lots of flags over there. I've seen this on television and on movies.
So it means you can basically come out. So Oxenfree means you can come out. Oh, that's interesting because obviously it must mean it's weird. It must be a cultural thing in the fact that
a safe kind of thing.
If you're American, you probably hear the name Oxenfree and go, okay, I know what that is. But if you're English, you just go, what a weird name for a band.
So without losing the game, that the positions of the sides are changing, blah, 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 or that the game is over. So it's it's a kind of okay, you can come out now kind of thing for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So,
game is over. That might have some relevance to the game.
Interesting. Okay, cool. So given that I'm not entirely sure where you're up to, do you want to intro the game and then I will take my lead from you so I don't spoil things?
Yeah, sure. Obviously, we don't want to spoil things for anyone, but it's a very kind of The setup is kind of a bit teen movie-ish, really, but it's kind of a sweet one. I guess we talked about Until Dawn quite recently-ish on the podcast in quite a lot of detail. And Until Dawn I really enjoyed, but Until Dawn is very much a kind of a knowing pastiche of teen horror movies in terms of it being like properly horror-y and like sexy teens and it's the slutty teen that's not actually slutty, she's actually a bit more and it was like playing with lots of kind of well-trodden Scream style film things, whereas Oxenfree is it feels a little bit more genuine in some ways. It feels like it's trying to be a kind of a homage or a pastiche, and more like it's actually just trying to have some nice sweet characters.
Yeah, it's really heartfelt. Like, you're right about the beginning. So at the beginning, there's 3 of you on this ferry on the way to Edward's Island, and you're going there for like an all-night beach party, you know, drinking beer, like chatting, hanging out kind of thing. And it's you, your best friend, and your new stepbrother, and you're going to meet up with a bunch of people. But then over the course of the beginning of the evening, you start sort of investigating this local legend that if you start like tuning your analog radio, then, you know, weird things will happen.
Yeah.
And so then the evening deteriorates.
Becomes weird.
But it's not in that same kind of like slasher movie terror inducing sort of, otherwise I wouldn't have been able to play it, you know, that's really not my cup of tea.
And you can kind of tell right from the bat in a way. It's, you know, again, it's like I'm comparing the two weirdly because they're actually very different, but they kind of take very different approaches to a similar idea of like teens and then weird stuff happening. Whereas like, you know, when these teenagers, hello fellow kids.
Hooligans.
If you are a child listening, I understand you. I'm not old yet. Hoverboards.
You bought a posture chair.
Tom Daly.
You lost your rights to the youth of today when you bought that posture chair.
Yeah, I've got a kneeling chair that you kind of wobble about in. I might have to send it back because it's I don't know if it's working out for me. We'll find out. Anyway, it's got this beautiful kind of painterly style in the fact that it's very kind of broad strokes in terms of how the characters and the world are drawn, and it does this thing of having 3D characters but are very basic, like simple characters, almost like kind of like slightly fancy versions of like Little Big Adventure characters in the way like they're like very simple, but it's fine because the characters on the screen are very small and they blend in nicely with the environment, which are kind of all these, I presume, like, you know, hand painted things, because it has this sort of, everything has this slightly kind of hazy veneer, but it's very subtle in terms of its use of colour and contrast, and you often have these kind of landscapes where, particularly at the start when you're on the boat, and you know, it's like the subtlety between tone and colour between things, it's actually it's quite striking in a vague way, but it does also create this lovely atmosphere, and you've got this sort of slightly Vangelis-y kind of almost sci-fi soundtrack in the background humming along.
Oh, it's lovely. Just the atmosphere that it creates is just this. I think that's the thing that communicates to you that this isn't that other kind of horror game. It's like, it's creepy and it's unnerving, but it's in the way of, when I was writing about it for RPS, I was saying it reminded me more of maybe a podcast like The Message, where it's kind of like a creepy sci-fi story that's being performed, but you're listening to it for... Yeah, there is the creepy sci-fi story side of it, but there's also these human relationships that are just being unpicked just by playing out in front of you all the time. And so I think that's the thing that Oxenfree does so beautifully, is just these conversations that you have as you're scrabbling around the island and as you're sort of wandering, and that sort of just reveal these people to you.
And that's the core of the game. To go back to, like, I've done this to start with, but to go back to what it kind of is, really you just control, well, so far I control a character going around, and really there's not a great deal of interactivity there. Like, there are kind of little things you can go and do and some very, very basic puzzle stuff, but mainly it's more about just walking through these beautiful landscapes and these beautiful areas and listening to these conversations, and the characters having conversations, and it does that thing that you get in Telltale games of getting to intervene with what you want to say. But again, like with Telltale when they're being the best, you don't have to either. It can be this thing if you can interject and say, well, stop, what are you talking about? But you can just listen if you don't want to say anything. But it's nice in the fact that it does some very subtle storytelling stuff early on by just sort of giving you an explanation of who the characters are and the basic stuff, and then it lets you decide whether or not you want to pick at that. And it's like, one of the characters, they've got like little past things, they've got things about them that are like, okay, that's obviously going to be a sort of sore spot for that character, but then it's up to you whether or not you want to behave in a careful way about that and be like, well, no, I don't want to ask them about that because that's going to bring up some bad times, or whether or not you want to pick at it and find out more. And that's as a game mechanic, I find that quite strange, because obviously really as gamers, we're kind of conditioned to almost treat story as being like unlocking achievements, and whenever somebody has some sort of sad backstory, you figure that you want to know all about it. And usually, obviously, the way games work is that you have a character who just says, oh, well, I don't want to talk about it. And then after you've done a special mission with them, they go, now I'm going to tell you all about my sad history. Whereas in this, it seems to give you the opportunity to really just press people about it. But I found myself being like, because the characters actually are really simple but good, real, like great voiceover, great writing.
They feel like people with actual relationships with each other, because you actually get to like build that with a sense of flow, I think, and it really rewards that. And I think part of it is because it's opaque about the reactions that the other person is having to you. I think the only real, I mean, obviously you get responses based on what you've said, and you can see how the relationship changes more broadly, but what you have on a moment-to-moment level is the only time that you really get the feeling that something important has happened overtly is when they have like a picture of the person's head above theirs.
Yeah, what does that mean?
Like I think it just means that something that you've said has been meaningful to them somehow, and I think that can be positive or negative. I hadn't like unpicked it too much, but
because I know there's a variety
I just really
of
love that as a kind of, that's the only clue that you get beyond watching it play out at a slower level.
I do enjoy the lo-fi kind of presentation in terms of UI and stuff. Like, there isn't like anything cluttering the screen. Sometimes it's kind of annoying. Like I like the fact that often your interaction with the world is things like these conversations are happening, and you always choose your conversations by, it's kind of made as on Xbox One as a game, so it means you kind of use like, I've been playing it with an Xbox pad, and it works perfectly of being like X, Y, and B on the controller or your conversation choices, but it means A is always there to select things, which means that if you're kind of not interested in the conversation, you can actually just interrupt it by just going to the next thing and just saying, what's this? And in the way that people do in conversations. And what's funny, I noticed, I don't know if it's intentional or not, but sometimes if somebody's saying something that is important, then you go, oh, what's this? And they go, oh, it's this. And then after you've resolved that, like, what am I looking at now? Or what's this about? They'll then go, but anyway, and they'll start saying what they were saying again. Whereas sometimes they don't.
That's the one thing that did annoy me about the conversation system, is at some points in the game, if you trigger a bit of necessary plot dialogue, but you're also responding to something else or like talking about something else in the environment, then those two lines will happen over each other.
Oh, really?
And so that was annoying me, but that only really happened sort of towards the end, where things were a bit more bunched up, whereas where at the point that you are, things are a bit more, you're going between places.
That's to be honest, the one thing I've found about it so far, which feels like it's not bad, but maybe a slight weakness in the design, is the fact that really what the game is about you wandering around with these teens, listening to these conversations, sometimes being a part of these conversations, and choosing where the conversations are steered, but also choosing sometimes where the action is steered in terms of like, are we leaving this place or are we staying here? But at the same time, I often find that these conversations are good, but then I'm just walking down the path, listening to them talking, and I get to the end of the path, and they're still talking. And I know that if I go to the next area, it will end this conversation. But then you have this awkward thing of everyone just hanging around, waiting for a conversation to end, and I'm like, this I think I stopped quite
natural. A lot, because I really like looking at the landscapes and stuff, and so that only happened to me maybe twice across the whole game. And so, I think, like, but I was also in the mindset where I was approaching it like a radio play, so I think there was a lot of me taking my hands off the keys and just listening. And
and I think actually like that's probably how I'll approach it. I think it was more today that it was like I realised I hadn't really played much in the past week, and I thought I should play some of this to
podcast evening.
I was like, I should play something, so maybe I was slightly more harried than I usually would be, but no, it's weirdly gentle and touching and nice, and especially with the music, as I say, it's kind of a bit sci-fi evangelis-y, bit kind of eerie, but often, I mean, I'm only in the early stages. I'm sure things will get a bit creepier as it goes on, but often, like, it's surprisingly creepy when it wants to be.
Yeah.
But at the same time, in between, it's, like, nice. It's like, it doesn't kind of have this thing of being like, oh, you're having a nice time. Now the weird things happened, so now this game is just going to be ratcheting dread. It feels like it's tonally not worried about being like, all right, we've been a bit creepy, but now we're going to go back to being quite gentle and nice again.
Yeah.
But it really creeped me out, the creepy stuff.
Yeah.
Like
There's a couple of moments that I was like,
right from the start when we first started doing it, I was like, this is really clever use of aesthetics, like to make me feel uneasy.
I really like, and I don't think this is spoilers simply because it's how the game comes about. You know, the idea that you start playing with these radio waves to sort of trigger the start of the game, really. And so radio plays a part in the game and also sort of glitchy kind of effects, and those were amazing.
Yeah.
I have so many screenshots of just the glitching that the game does, just because I think I'm just going to do a Pinterest of it because that's apparently what I do now, but it's just so gorgeous. I think the way it manifests on the screen, and I think that's a way of injecting a kind of a tactile element somehow, because it's so sort of crunchy when something glitches out. And
I know what you mean.
Yeah, I think
that's
otherwise
really,
it would be quite it would verge on twee, I think.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I think that's
stops that dead.
I think that's what's impressed me most about the kind of weird stuff is the fact that it does this thing of being like, because the standard aesthetic of the game is quite vague, quite hazy, quite low contrast and low tonal difference in many ways. It's more like kind of a feel of a place. You know, it's very sparing with contrast and with color. But then when these sort of glitchy things happen, suddenly you do get these elements of sharpness, these elements of bright colors, and these elements of definition which just don't exist in the world. And it's a really nice way of like accentuating it and making it feel like what's going on, like, and shocking you out of it, of suddenly having these moments of clarity, both in terms of actually the visuals and the audio, I've noticed, because the audio is all quite like vague and dreamy, and suddenly it's like and even actually weirdly, I never thought I'd be praising a game for the use of this after so many years of it existing, but I've been playing it with a controller, and the use of controller rumble is fantastic. And the fact that it only actually makes the controller rumble at the point at which you're tuning your radio in to something creepy. Because obviously, you know, it's kind of a mild spoiler, but you've probably worked it out already that really a lot of the mechanic in the game of when you uncover these creepy things is you have to get your radio out and you tune to a frequency, and then things kind of start happening. And there's something about that, the fact that it's not just something that's happening when you go to a certain point, it's the fact that you're doing it. There's some added element of dread as you kind of, as the crunching sound gets louder, you know that you're tuning into something weird and you don't know what it is. And I'm always like, oh, don't do this. Yeah, I mean, I'm a big softy really with this sort of thing. I get easily freaked out.
Yeah, I mean, I can't review horror games, and Adam knows this, and like, I'm so glad that I hadn't read the Steam description, because it does just sort of say, oh, you know, horror. I think it mentions horror, and I think I would have been like, Adam, are you sure? Like, seriously, I'm not good. You know, like, I can't play Five Nights at Freddy's. There's like a video of me trying on like YouTube or something, and it's like, oh.
But no, so you've played more of it, so like. You obviously reviewed it, so you must recommend it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I really do. Those things that we've talked about just carry through for the rest of the game, and like the strength is definitely the relationship building and the conversational side of things. That doesn't mean like that the story and the way that resolves is unsatisfactory at all. It's more that like relative strength is, I would say, the.
Well, I've heard there's a lot of different like endings and stuff.
I think so. I'd really like to replay it. And I just need to sort of like work out the timings for that, like just in terms of work. But
sure.
I have that weird feeling of that I was playing as me, not as the protagonist Alex in it. And I want to go through and play in a way that feels true to her now.
Yeah, but it's tough because she's not a blank slate by any means. You're given a background, but at the same time, it does kind of give you a lot of options. I mean, it's like, this is like something within the first 20 minutes. It's not really a spoiler, but, early on, like, this guy's like, oh yeah, I really like this girl, so, just try and be cool, like, don't, just be nice sort of thing. And then you turn up and, like, I think it's like one of the girls who's, I think the friend of the girl he fancies is just like a total dick. And it's this thing of like, this guy seems like, you've only met him for about 10 minutes in the game, but you know that he's your friend and he asked you to be cool, but then it's this thing of like, how much are you going to bite your tongue? You get to the point where you just kind of want to go, no, fuck you, like, and it kind of plays with in that way of being like, are you going to keep being polite to this person? But I like that it actually does also, like, it humanizes them much more quickly. There's a tendency in, the Walking Dead games are kind of famous for being like, it's kind of a mild spoiler for the first series of the Walking Dead games, but it's that thing of being like, oh, this guy's a dick, isn't it? This guy's a dick, this guy's a dick. He's racist as well. Oh, he's racist and he's a dick. Yeah, but he really loved his wife and she died. And he's never been the same since. And it kind of uses that as an emotional kind of seesaw.
They tried to do that in Holby City last week.
Really?
Well, kind of, yeah. Like, there's this guy called Guy Self who's like one of the resident narcissists, and he was trying to take over the hospital. And then, like, they had like this concept episode where they spent a lot of time like as if they were making a documentary like within the show about him and his like putative like neurosurgery lab that he wants funding for and stuff like that, and the operations that he's doing. But a lot of it was like focused on this lady who works at the coffee shop and like what she sees in him, because she's like the one who thinks that he's a real life human being rather than the narcissist who's trying to take over the hospital because he's a narcissist. And so there's a lot about like, I mean, it comes up again and again in the show anyway, but like about his wife and how he still loves her even though she died, and all of this stuff. And so it's kind of like, we will humanize him so that you maybe care about the decision about whether he tries to stage a coup.
Yeah. But it's the thing is, it's interesting when you do this as well. Like, I think it was very effective in The Walking Dead where they kind of make you get this character's awful and he's awful. And then they go, we're going to humanize him now. And then just make you feel retrospectively bad for a history that you have of disliking this person and maybe making choices that didn't benefit that person. And just playing with your emotions there. So that was very effective in The Walking Dead, because really, that was a game which in many regards was about human guilt and about guilting you and making you think, oh, you shouldn't have done that, did you? But you did, and everyone remembers it, and you're going to have to just keep playing this game knowing that you did that. Whereas in Oxenfree, it's quite nice that early on it's like, this character's a dick, but here's why she might be a dick. And it's like, you kind of go, oh, but then it actually in a way makes the decisions more difficult, because then you're like, well, should I like try and be nice to them? Because you're like, well, on the one hand they're a dick, but on the other hand,
because I was sort of approaching it with that outsider, I'm the godlike sort of controller of this thing, and I'm sort of able to take that like the broader view and sort of say, well, I'm going to try and be understanding a lot of the time because I've sort of found out all of this other thing. But I that's why I kind of feel like I'd like to go back and play it more as how I think that she would have been. Yeah, if that makes sense. Like,
I'm already quite into the character actually, even though I don't know much about her. It's like
I really, really like her actually, and I just I think I just want to sort of play the story again and just do right by her in that way. It sounds so weird.
No, it's a really good character piece. It is. It's like it's kind of that teenagers thing, but the script isn't cringeworthy, and it's got some fun, interesting relations, and it's just a bit of a joy to walk through. And I find actually this kind of game, this sort of a more gentle game, is increasingly finds a lot of time in my heart and in my life. I think it's nice to have. I mean, I'm still into my kind of like more intense experiences, but it's really nice to have something like this, especially when basically, as you say, it is the best way to describe it is it's like a radio drama. Yeah. But you do actually have a bit of a say in how it goes.
It's not like an arduous time commitment either. It's like an evening's work, like a full evening, but an evening.
Yeah, it's like 4 or 5 hours right here. Yeah. But then obviously there is the replay value if you want to go back and do it again, do it differently. And as I say, I've done that, so we don't know how much it varies. But I'm interested because there's like one point where like I decided to do something and then something happened, and I'm like, well, what would have happened if I'd done the other thing? Like, obviously that's what happens with choice-based games, but it's whether or not there are actually kind of
I think this time there's a lure to me to actually go back rather than to just look up replays on YouTube, you know?
Yeah, but weirdly, it's weird you say that though in a way, isn't it? Because of the fact that, as you say, it is kind of like a radio drama. So watching something on YouTube, obviously you'd have to find one without any any dickhead talking over it. Obviously, no commentary, because I can't imagine anything worse.
It's weird. I think I went in too far into radio drama world with it at first because I was playing mouse and keyboard, and so obviously you need both of your hands. And I kept being really resentful of that because I was like, but I just want to enjoy this and have my cup of tea. Like, it felt like I should be entitled somehow to sit back and like have my hot drink.
I get that. I really like those boundaries. It's why I really enjoyed in The Witcher 2 being able to choose to switch off the QTE bits, because it's like in my mind, like QTE was fine in like Resi, where like, you know, Resi did have cutscenes, but really the whole time you were playing that game, you were leaning forward, you were grabbing your control. I mean, Resi 4, obviously, but you know, you were really, you were in it because it was an intense game. But when you're playing something else like story-based, and when it starts doing a cutscene, there is something nice about being able to put your controller to one side and pick up your mug of tea and watch.
Yeah.
And just be like, have that kind of balance of being like, I'm playing an interactive game, but then it's nice sometimes to have it moments where it's not interactive and it becomes like a mini TV thing for 5 minutes or 2 minutes or however long. And when they start doing this thing of you watching something and then suddenly you go, oh God, and you have to like,
oh no, it needs a reaction.
Wrestle a cup of tea with the thing, and then you've been eaten by a dragon. You just go, I'm not having fun with this. Like, but the idea of, because it creates a bad mentality if you're just trying to watch something and engage with the story, but you're also there like ready.
Yeah.
To leap. It's like, that's not natural.
I think that kind of then encourages you to just be like idly pressing A or whatever, and then you accidentally skip a thing, and then you're like, oh dear.
It just gets you edgy, doesn't it? It gets you edgy. And it's funny how much I've been enjoying it much more, like, well, I enjoy The Witcher 2 more with it off, and how much I've actually really been enjoying playing The Witcher 3 still. I'm still getting into it of being like, oh great, this is going to be a bit where there's just a bunch of story. And I've enjoyed just being like, I'm going to now kind of put the control to one side and just occasionally go through the menu to select a new question. And I'm going to spend 5 minutes just listening to this person talking about the world and what's going on.
You're going to love movies.
What are movies?
I'll get you Netflix.
Are they like tax returns?
Maybe even better.
What?
Maybe there's a movie about a tax return.
The Tax Return. That's a romantic comedy.
The Tax Collector.
Yeah.
There must be a movie called that.
There must be.
It's but he probably collects bones or something.
Yeah, it's probably
like,
something weird, isn't it?
He's got like a tax on like, I don't know, like human, I don't know, souls? Is that a thing?
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably. But yeah, Oxenfree, if you're a fan of like kind of slightly creepy-ish teen drama or just anything that's nice and atmeric and not too intense.
It filled the Life is Strange void.
Yeah, you see, I thought people might say that.
Yeah.
I still haven't played Life is Strange. But because Oxenfree popped up and it was shorter.
Yeah.
So I thought, yeah, that one, please.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So what else have you been playing recently?
I have started to get back into regular Dota, if you'd like to talk about that. Or we can talk about the preview segment of the ABC Murders, which is a Poirot point and click.
I'm kind of interested in this second part just because you said it while sort of laughing, which makes me think that it's going to be more entertaining.
It's the most me thing that's probably ever.
Well, I don't know about that because I know a lot of people have really got into the Sherlock Holmes games, which came out recently, which I kind of shrugged off because I saw lots of people on Twitter posting screenshots of them, and they were always funny screenshots of being like, look at this dead man's bum and stuff, and I just assumed that it was like a joke, and
that's
they
just
were like,
Twitter though, isn't it?
Yeah, I know it is. So I didn't think of anything of it. I just thought, well, obviously they're absolute shit games, but people have got them as a joke and they're playing them. But actually, more and more, I'm realising that actually there's a lot of sincerity, and a lot of people actually, even though these kind of Sherlock Holmes games, I can't remember what it's called, Crime and Punishment or something.
Oh yeah, that's one of them.
People say that they know they're kind of rubbish.
Isn't it?
Yeah. People say that, like, I know it's kind of rubbish, but they really sincerely like them. So I think
I've
actually,
got one on my computer. Actually, I should play this.
I should. I mean, I've been trying to meaning to get into Euro Truck Simulator 2. It's pretty similar.
Oh no, I can't deal with Euro Truck Simulator, but it's because I drive, and so it really freaks me out that I'm not actually having to turn my head to look in a mirror, and then we get into the realms of how much of a truck cab do I build build in my bedroom, and then
VR.
Yeah.
It's all about VR.
Yeah.
I actually would like to play that with VR. I don't know why.
Andy Kelly from PC Gamer was telling me that it's amazing with an Oculus Rift.
Yeah, that's the thing. And I mean, also, like, I tried to play some Elite, and flying a spaceship is just way above my level. So I think driving a truck is probably like more on par with what I'm kind of capable as a human.
I think I just want to go on a road trip.
Yeah. I should probably actually learn to drive. That's the thing. Or learn to fly a
It'll
spaceship.
ruin Euro Truck Simulator for you, I'll tell you that
But
much.
ABC Murders with Poirot. What's it like being Poirot? Are you actually Poirot?
Oh, so this is the thing. I think I sort of maybe disappeared into my own little private, like, Poirot dome for a while, because I don't really think you play as Poirot, but the game tells you that you do, and you wander around as a Belgian detective. So yes, you do play as Poirot.
Does it look like the actor?
It's it looks like the base model of Poirot, if you see what I mean. It doesn't look like exactly like David Suchet, but they have done things like they've taken from the ITV series in that they've used the same set of flats that's actually in East London by Barbican as his as the visual in the game for his flats, and I was like, wait, what? Like that just sort of struck me as a bit weird. And like the guy that you see at the typewriter at first, like I think that's based on the visual for. I'd need to dig out my DVDs and stuff. So they do take visual signifiers from the ITV series, which is amazing.
They couldn't get the facial rights for Suchet.
I don't think they could get Suchet, but I
don't know how savvy Suchet is with.
He's on Twitter. He tweets.
Yeah.
I tweet at him every now and again.
Does he reply?
Tweet at him, tweet at Paul Danan. It's all going on. All going on.
That's a hell of a combination. I'm just imagining you now having dinner with Paul Danan and Suchet.
I'd somehow crashed that edition of Celebrity Come Dine With Me.
I was just thinking that's like the weirdest episode of Celebrity
Biggins
Love
would be
Island
there, you know.
ever.
Anyway, but so there are like trappings that you would recognise if you're into those adaptations, and you are playing through the case that is presented to you in the books. The thing that I was sort of interested in, sort of possibly on a ridiculously have overthought this level, is that the work that you do as Poirot in the game is that you're doing things like you're trying to work out how the first person died, and you're trying to work out the window that could have happened in. So basically the basic time of death and stuff. And I decided to reread the books while I was doing all of this, just playing through and trying to sort of see what it was that was leaving me unsatisfied. And I realised that in the books, the police have done all of that stuff before Poirot turns up, and Poirot does all these like clever little things around the side.
Dog's body work.
No, he doesn't do the basic police work. Like the police are they're unimaginative, but they're competent, you know? And so he shows up and they're like, okay, well this happened, and I think it was between this time because these people arrived and blah, blah, blah. But you do that for yourself in the game, whereas Poirot's like off doing all these other things, pretending to be other people, shit. You know.
Come on.
And so that was a thing for me. It was like
he's out about being canny,
and like. So, and I get why they did it that way, because that stuff is so much easier to do as a point and click kind of procedural.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, is like Poirot isn't the procedural guy. He's like the guy that you call in when that stuff isn't working because he thinks round corners. But like, how do you simulate that in a point and click fashion?
How do you do it as well? How do you make people think around corners? Because the problem is, how do you do that without actually doing it?
Because his whole thing is about like being a great observer of human nature and being able to sort of unpick that and really sort of get to the root of people's motives and things like that, and like picking up like little clues and stuff. But he's actually really amazing with manipulating people, and like and that
again,
side is
like, how do you
represent that in a game. And so you spend a lot of the time just sort of, like you'll examine a bit of the scene for clues, but that's, you move your mouse around and it zeroes in on particular things when you hover over it for a period of time, and then the game like tells you the clues, and then you can like put them together in your, like, there's a little grey cells menu.
Yeah.
And so you can like piece them together and stuff, and there's a logic to it, and that can be pleasing. I didn't find any puzzles that like were challenging. Like there's a few things in that, like, this is obviously only the preview build. I should totally like stress that, like, things might change, all of that stuff. But like there were a few things where you were trying to maybe open a puzzle box or something like that.
Yeah.
And it was like I just moved the things that were available to move, and then I opened it, and it's like, right, okay. So it's like, it kind of felt like it wanted to tell me the story. And so I wasn't averse to not being stuck, because like if you're playing as Poirot, you wouldn't be stuck on these things as well.
Yeah.
Like, so it's, I think that, I wonder if it's an impossible task to do the Poirot thing.
I think it might be.
In a game to a satisfactory degree, especially with what we have at the moment.
Yeah, especially because, as you say, Poirot is a much more human detective than, say, Sherlock. Sherlock is like a machine.
Yeah.
And he just notices all the detail and adds things together through deduction, and is the sort of person that now, if you met him on the internet, you'd be like, this guy's a fucking tool. But Poirot is a human.
Or via iPlayer.
Yeah. Whereas like Poirot is like, he is, as you say, he's very good at like kind of getting under people's skin, and also getting on people's good side and manipulating people into giving them the information he needs. He's a people person. He's got an amazing moustache. So I think it is actually, as a choice of target to try and emulate, very difficult. But even Sherlock, I think that like, in the TV show, they kind of simulate this idea of him being super observant by just having all this text popping up everywhere and him zoning in on stuff and immediately getting the backstory. I think if you slowed that process down, you could probably make an interesting game out of it, of being like, oh, what's that? It's this.
Yeah.
Why is that relevant? And then actually like allowing you to like go through the mental processes of thinking, what does that tell about the person? What can we piece this together? And then having that satisfying payoff. But it's interesting actually, because I've been playing recently, I've only played a case of it, but a board game, which we talked about on Shut Up and Sit Down.
Yeah, was it Consulting Detective?
Yeah. Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. It's not even a board game, actually. It's just like a book.
A book that you consult at various points, and then you're like, oh, okay, that's how I think it pieces together,
What's lovely about that, though, is
awesome.
You're a detective. You've got to try and solve the crime. And then afterwards, Sherlock has writing where Sherlock tells you what happened, and then it tells you how Sherlock worked it out. And it's basically the whole process is like, you're not Sherlock.
Yeah.
Like, Sherlock always gets it like really quickly, and then he makes you look like an idiot.
But the thing
that's kind of fun.
The thing with the books in both of those cases is Poirot's stories are told by Captain Hastings, and Sherlock's stories are told by Watson. And they're both kind of stand-ins for you, because otherwise, like, why would the explanation be necessary? Like, they talk you through the whole thing, and so I get that, like, you would be doing like the detective work, or needing to be led through it, or needing to actually like properly work at this stuff if you were one of those. And so I kind of wonder whether if the game was located on a different character, and sort of Poirot or Holmes or whoever was sort of more just in your orbit.
Yeah, and obviously with Holmes it works.
Yeah.
Because you can be Watson, because he's there. Yeah. And Sherlock can go, well, of course I've worked it out, but how about you work it out, Watson?
Yeah.
Whereas like if Poirot started just telling like the captain, why don't you become a crime investigator?
Sometimes he tries. What? Like, he tries to, like, coax Hastings through the thing, but in the books he generally, like, gives up. He's just like, oh, for God's sake, Hastings, like, this is ridiculous. And, like, because, like, at the beginning of that book, like, the actual book, there's a point where I think Hastings is utterly confounded by the fact that Poirot's hair seems to have got less grey since he went away. And it's like, yeah, I'm dyeing it. Like, obviously. And like,
not the sharpest tool in the box.
But he's just really straightforward. Like, I think that goes under the same box of lies, It's like, but
you're lying with your hair.
And so, but the book also has like this glorious, like, kind of touching acknowledgement of everyone getting older as well. Like, Poirot's older, and Hastings has been away in South America because he moved there on a ranch with his wife. I know too much, but and so he's come back to sort of work with Poirot and sort of visit and all of that stuff, I think. And so it's them seeing each other and noticing the signs of aging, and the same with Inspector Japp and, you know, all of that kind of stuff. And it's like, there's just lots of little touching bits. There's lots of like funny things. Like, it's like, I thought you were retired. And he was like, well, yeah. But it's kind of like when an opera singer says, yeah, I'm done, and then like keeps coming back for like one last performance.
Yeah. It does sound like they've bitten off a tough challenge there. Probably just because Poirot is a big name. Yeah. But it's funny how like I'm actually really pleased to see that there are more devs now trying to tackle that fascinating niche of almost like daytime crime drama. Yeah. Because I think that is going to be
wouldn't
huge.
you just love like a Murder, She Wrote, like
I'm thinking personally
episodic thing, or Diagnosis Murder.
I'm thinking Midsummer Murders.
No, because my plan for Midsummer Murders is that it gets an MMO.
Everybody lives in
Massively Midsummer is what it's going to be called.
I am actually like increasingly obsessed with Midsummer Murders just because my mum is
so good,
and my mum's obsessed with it in a really fascinating way, and she knows so much about it, and I'm like, well, it's all people getting killed in one place, right, all the time. Like, it's one little town is full of.
It's a county. It's a whole
and she's
county.
Like, no, it's a county. There's all these places. And I'm like, well, surely, like... And she's like, no, they must have a map of it somewhere, because sometimes they go back to count.
Yeah,
like,
you can do a tour. Like, I think in Oxfordshire, there's like a tour, a Midsummer tour.
Yeah, but they have like recurrent characters, because they haven't been to this town for a while, and they go there, and it's like the landlord's still the same, and it's like, what the fuck? Like, they've actually... but I mean, really, in terms of narrative design, it's dreadful. Just because the amazing thing is my mum loves it because she says it's tonally consistent, which means there's never anyone really shouting very loudly. So you can basically start watching an episode, see the premise of the episode, and then you can fall asleep for 40 minutes, and then you can wake up for the last 10 minutes, and the crime will be resolved. And none of the information in the middle, none of the conversations or interviews or red herring, all red herrings.
Yeah, like you don't have to deal with the red herring because you're just like, seriously, we're beyond that.
You literally just watch the intro and the bit where they talk to some of the characters, and then the last bit, and the bit in the middle is actually like you can be unconscious for it and it's fine.
Yeah.
Which I think is weirdly like there's a lot of they need to do that in video games. Basically, have video games where if there is a filler section, you can fall asleep physically.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
I think the thing with the ABC murder is that I'm wondering whether I'm the best person to talk about it. Like, in some ways, I am the best person to talk about it, but like, I'm not sure that other people would have that same kind of like level of being bothered about like the essence of Poirot.
I don't know. I don't know. I think people who are into that sort of thing are into it, and I think that's
fair.
But it's funny. I think I'm think it's a niche which is not being covered well, and I think especially once like current like. Things like iPads and stuff, we're getting quite technologically decent now. I think there's a killing to be made in somebody making like a fantastic daytime murder simulator.
Yeah.
Like,
I think the one thing that I would say, like, is that even though I found it quite straightforward, like, to the point of, like, it didn't really offer me, like, it says on the website, like, that it will offer you a challenge, basically, and I think if I'd bought it on that basis, from what I've played, I would be a bit disappointed. But, like, somebody in the comments was saying, but what about, like, because they know the plot, like, if you've seen the TV series.
I was going to say, if it's actually
and it's
the same
a really
stories.
memorable plot, and, like, I'm horrible at remembering things, so I'm fine. That's why I can watch murder mysteries again and again, because I forget what happens, and I'm like, how does this end? I don't know.
When are they going to find the wolf on the moors?
But then, like, these people in the comments were, and rightly so, saying, this is such a memorable plot, like, is it going to be fun for me to sort of solve? And I'm like, well, I think it's elegant enough, like the plot itself, that it will elevate the game, whatever the game does.
Yeah.
Like, whether it's better than what I've played, whether it's worse than what I've played, whether it's the same as what I've played, like, the plot will always be there because it's amazing. It's well crafted. It's a beautiful thing. And, like, but if you know it and you're not like me and have, like, a memory of absolutely no retaining power whatsoever, then yeah, like, I'm not sure what you'd... Yeah. I kind of read the book.
I'm kind of quietly hoping that in the future you'll be able to come back on here, having played some of the Sherlock Holmes games and the Poirot games, and come and give the definitive answer on which period detective games are the best ones. I think it'd be a great niche to be an expert in. Forget about point and click Mobies. The Mobies.
The Mobies.
Yeah, we would talk about Dota, but I just end up talking about Dota forever.
No, it's fine. I would say that the Midsummer Murders MMO was a serious suggestion, and I do think someone should make that.
That'd be amazing.
Yeah.
You'd have to like level up so you could murder someone.
Or like something like Witcher 3 kind of scale of like, where you just sort of have all of these crimes that have happened across the land and you have to
But instead of like finding like in unseen blood marks from 6 years ago, you just find like the divorce papers. Their marriage isn't going well.
Or like the will or something that was recently changed.
Actually, it would be fucking impossible in a game because something like Midsummer Murders is so bloody vague, and you get this thing where you think any of these 8 people could be the murderer.
Yeah.
But then all it comes down to is like usually gut instinct, and that's one thing that video games don't do well.
Yeah.
I mean, do you remember like obviously like LA Noire, that thing of being, somebody saying something that seemed relatively convincing and then just immediately looking around the room as if like they just murdered a dog and left it on the floor in front of you and hoping that you're not going to see the dog literally in front of your face. It was like the worst acting.
It was like
in the world.
looking up the Google definition of shifty.
The tech for that game was amazing, but whoever was directing those actors needed to be fired.
Yeah.
Like immediately. Because whoever looked at that and went, that was a great take for you looking vaguely suspicious. Like,
I don't know, maybe we should have taken it as like an insult. Like, it's kind of like, well, these people don't understand subtlety. Give it to them like full on in the face.
Maybe it was, I don't know. But what was sad about it was like they had good actors doing that. Those actors did not do that. Somebody directed them. No, you need to look more suspicious. And it was the fidelity of it was amazing. So they could have got away with being like way more subtle. I think actually, if they'd used crap actors, I would have forgiven it. But they used great actors.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
We should video games should take a cue from those those what are they called, the fake patients? That teach doctors empathy. Like
really?
Yeah,
I didn't know about
there's
this.
like sort of patients that you have come in and you sort of coach them what their symptoms should be and like what their situation is, their background and stuff like that. There was an article in The Atlantic about it last year, I think, and that one was like focused on empathy building between doctors and patients. So you'd have people where you thought maybe there was a domestic abuse element or there was like all of this other stuff, and it was like about sort of listening and sort of responding in a way that meant the patient would hear you rather than just giving them the information and then leaving.
And some doctors can be super cold as well. Like, I mean, we had an experience last year. My other half was always something quite rare, and it meant that she had lots of people coming to see her, and occasionally it was this weird thing of being like, you could tell it was almost like people just wanted to meet her because she was a statistical like celebrity of being like, they were just like, oh, and they were talking to her like, I said, oh yeah, what you've got is really fascinating, and talking about it as if they were like a record collector. And it was this weird thing of being like, it was fine, but it was weird. It was kind of like, oh man, like you don't talk to patients very often, do you?
Oh, so like I think.
It's like they're almost excited about what you've got. You're like, well, we're not that hot for it, really.
No.
But, I'm glad that you're excited.
Well, one of us is getting something out of this, I guess. But and I think there was, I was Googling about it afterwards, and there are things, in the UK where I think that the specific super sort of focusing on the empathy thing maybe is a result of a particular program or a particular doctor. But there's, there are programs like that in the UK. Like I think there was a hospital in Scotland that was just advertising for, do you have time to come in and like spend some time with these doctors? We'll coach you in what to say and like what your symptoms should be, and that's how they learn how to do the interaction that is required to get the information.
And I think there's actually to bring it back, there's a kind of actually more substantial crossover than people might think between doctors and game designers in terms of empathy and in terms of actually having that thing of sometimes people are too close to it and they're too close to the more detailed picture or the bigger picture sometimes, and they forget about the human element. I was thinking about this the other day actually. I've been playing a few games which are kind of like video games which are trying to be a bit like board games. I've been trying to get is it Theseus to run on my PC? It won't open. It's buggy as hell. But anyway, I find it interesting playing things like Armello, for example, which tries to be like a kind of digital board game. And there's lots of things to challenge, lots of challenges there, like making dice rolling and card picking feel tangible and nice. And I think those things haven't really been mastered by many things yet. Hopefully we'll see more people realizing actually, you know what, the way dice bounce and roll and fall is important, and the way it feels to draw a card is important. I think Hearthstone's probably really good at that. It's not a good game, but bloody hell, it feels tactile and cool.
It really does, actually, especially on tablet as well. Like, that's proper kind of, okay, this is my play space. I'm actually holding it. I'm moving the cards with my hands. You know, it's I guess, only a sort of a conceptual step away from...
Yeah, and a lot of that just comes down to the very specifics of aesthetics and kind of physical feedback. But something I think about a lot is, you know, how poorly games manage to convey opponents as opponents.
Yeah.
And I think
as opponents or as real people?
Well, I think it's tricky, actually. I think about this, and I think actually, like, when I was playing Armello, I had similar problems to I don't know, it just felt like in that there wasn't really any conversation at all, and you were expected to treat these people as being opponents, but really they were just things to get in your way. They were as relevant as, say, creatures in the wild that might attack you. You were just like, you kind of ignored them, and you had the opportunity to maybe concentrate on what they were doing, but why would you? Yeah. And that's what it comes down to, is when you've got an equal AI opponent, often games kind of give them the same sets of powers and the same options as you, but then you're like, well, why would I bother actually thinking about what they're doing? And that comes down to two things, I guess. It comes down to you having a distrust in how good the AI actually is, and the belief that they might actually be worth trying to follow. But also, like, just communication. I mean, I remember in Civ, for example, like the classic thing of being like, you know, basically you get Gandhi being like, oh, hello, you're beautiful. Will you give me the technology for the Great Wall? And you go, no. And then he goes, then I will crush you. And that's kind of it. And I think, like, the amount of games I've played since where you have these AI opponents, I just think that it's difficult with that, because obviously with that it is trying to emulate leaders. But I think in a way there's not that much of a difference between diplomacy in games like that, in 4X games like that, and diplomacy in board games. And I just think having a bit of writing with a bit of empathy, simple things of like, you know, being like, I'd like you to move away from my borders, please. Yeah. And then if you say no, then they go, all right, well, just bear in mind that if you do hang around there, then, you know, something might happen. Or actually being able to have that thing of it escalating, of being like, them being like, having people going from being like, seriously, don't do that, and then you doing that, and then going, right, well, now I'm going to attack you back and do this thing, and actually getting to the point where I'd love it if they start to have more empathy in the fact that having conversations with people that starts off very reasonable and very back and forth, but then if you keep screwing people over, they just go, fuck you. Like, in the same way, I think that's what I'd love to see more of that in games, of actually having relationships, so it's not just about how you are now, but about actually, like, that escalation of being like, this is probably a mistake, but just do this, then through to, like, after you've betrayed someone once, but then you can reparate it. But especially in games, it often allows you that thing of, like, having that thing of being like, hey, we're at war, now we're friends. Now we're at war, now we're friends. I'd love it if you could do it twice, and then next time you go, can we be friends, they just go, do you really think I'd ever fall for something like that ever again? And just I'd like to see more of that. And I think it's something that's an oversight.
When you were talking, I was just wondering whether maybe a shorthand for it would be to have an AI that was capable of developing grudges. Yeah. Even if it wasn't capable of doing all of the other things, if you screw it over too many times, you just activate, like, grudge mode, like Paul does in games.
Absolutely. That's the thing. And that's what I mean, is that's something that's often missing, is that AI often just behaves too pragmatically sometimes. And I'd love to see actually a bit more humanity added in the form of an AI which would be pragmatic to begin with. Then we'll actually start to become a bit like, naturally, you keep screwing me over, I'm going to take this thing that you've got. And then getting to the point where actually you've pissed them off so much that they just don't care anymore, and they are just hell-bent on messing with you just because you fuck with them and you've gone against what you said to do, and just being vindictive. And because they're always like
maybe if you could just pick from personalities as well, like, maybe that would be an interesting way to sort of fiddle with this. I have no answers.
I know there are no answers. It's just something I was thinking about, and thinking about how, like, I don't know how you really can just drive people to rage, of being like, I'm going to crush you, and being like, well, no, let's be reasonable, and then them, rather than doing that thing of like, well, doing what people do in actual board games, of being like, they go, all right, yeah, sure, and they agree to the trade, they take all your money, and then they crush you anyway, and you go, well, why did you crush me?
It's like my sister in Monopoly, I'm telling you. All the lies, so many lies.
That's what I find weird about. I mean, I understand it has to be a reliable system, but I find it interesting that in a video game, if you come to an agreement and say, well, we're going to be allies, I'm going to give you all this money, then we're going to be allies. If you seal that deal is sealed. It exists. They're not going to screw you over immediately. However, if it was somebody you'd screwed over 5 or 6 times, like already, they take your money and then they kill you.
Yeah, it would be interesting, like, if it learned, at least, or responded to the behaviours that you were exhibiting. Because, like, that's interesting, because I don't really play 4X, so I hadn't really thought about that for such a long time. And so my real main experience at the moment with AI is when I'm just practising stuff in MOBAs. And with that, it's me, like, working out what the bots want at any given time, because you have to work around them, because they won't work around you for the most part.
You learn what they're doing.
Yeah, you learn their basic sort of things, like how to move them from lane to lane, or to get them to push, or, you know, how to give basic instructions. But then at a certain point, they do what they've been programmed to do from that point of the game onwards, and all you can do is go with it, quit out, or fight it really hard for no apparent gain. And so like, that's where I am with AI at the moment. It's just like, oh, okay, well, I guess I'm going to behave like a bot now, because that's what I need to do.
And I guess maybe that's why it is the way it is. Maybe it's not a case of me saying this and being like, everything should be better. Maybe it's just a case of have tried better things, and actually the way it works best is having simple, understandable things.
Maybe it's teaching me empathy for bots.
Be like, these guys are always peaceful.
I understand what they're coming from at this point. I'm just like, you want to push? That's great. Okay, let's push. Let's just push.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Actually, I've played with bots, and you just go, well, I'm just going to... Actually, if you just do what they're doing, it's way more effective.
I know, right?
You're like, okay, it's time to do this. I'm going to follow you.
Maybe it is I who is learning the lesson.
But I just find it interesting how actually sometimes there's this tendency to have, like, you know, in those sorts of games, you have like the super aggressive people who will always want war, the super peaceful people who will always want trade and peace.
I know, right?
And I don't know, I think often you get these like messages that are quite terse and quite like flowery, and they put a lot of concentration in these games into making it so that the races or the characters feel like different, but maybe actually less writing, but better writing and more variants would go a long way to just be able to get that feeling, because it does seem like in games when you have to deal with characters in political ways, they are either they love you, they like you, they're not bothered, or they don't like you very much, or they hate you.
Maybe it's an audience thing though as well, because like
maybe
you and I would probably settle, I hope I'm not just assuming, but we'd probably settle for a jankier AI that felt more like real, or felt like it was doing something interesting to us or to the experience of playing the game. But I'm guessing that a lot of like particularly historical focused strategy, like there's an element of having an audience that really appreciate getting the tone of it right historically, rather than building an AI that's sort of not attached to a historical figure in some way, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, no, I get that.
That does the in air quotes right thing at the right time.
Yeah, no, I get that. Yeah, I think it's also just it's a big challenge. Like we've still struggled to work out ways to make characters feel human in a way which A, it works and isn't creepy, and B, fits mechanically with what the game is and how it works.
Yeah, for sure.
But I just love to have more vindictiveness. I'd actually love to have, because I've had that in board games, and I think that's something I've learned from board games, is the point where you try and you hold out the olive branch for the 6th time.
Was subterfuge not enough for you?
Well, no, it's more it's different with board games. You play it for an hour, but it's this thing of I love it when you hold out the olive branch and the other player just goes, "Fuck you." Like, even though it makes sense for them to have peace.
I've done that so many times in Cosmic Encounter.
I'm going to kill you. Precisely. And I love that. And
to Brendan every single time since he dicked me over in City of Horror.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't trust you. That was a year ago. I don't trust you.
So much more respect if it was just the AI just went, fuck off. You'd just be like, yeah, fair enough. You shouldn't trust me. You'd be stupid if you did. But yeah. Finally, actually, I will mention I had a quick go the other day on, today, on a kind of board game which is going on Kickstarter tomorrow when you listen to this podcast.
Ooh.
It's kind of a board game thing. Fabulous Beasts.
I have played a little bit of that. They were at Rezzed, I believe.
Okay, yeah, because we saw it the first time when we were at GDC, and we talked about it on this podcast, which is why I'm mentioning it again on the podcast, and described it as being almost like a game you might play see being played in Star Trek or Star Wars, of it being like a kind of
piling up a zoo on a plate, isn't it?
Yeah, it's more the fact that you look at it and go, what the fuck is that? And in films and TV, it doesn't need to explain what it is, because it just can have it as a visual aid and then go, well, yeah, obviously it was just a weird future game, wasn't it? Whereas this does actually have rules. They've reworked a bunch of stuff since I initially saw it. They've actually made it primarily now, rather than the competitive game, an actual collaborative game where you're actually working together to try and get the high score, which is kind of lovely. It needs a little bit more in terms of sort of a sense of progress, in terms of like it needs some systems around that, whether it's like every time you get creatures it adds into a bestiary, or whether it's having a score that builds up over games or something. But they're working on that stuff.
Because you pile up the animals on like this special disc, don't you? And like on the tablet, it tells you what animal to put on, does it? Or I can't remember exactly what it was, or I don't know if it's changed.
Yeah, it's changed quite a bit, but what they've done now is they've basically made it so these little animals are geometric object, colourful shapes.
Beautiful kind of colourful polygonal things, aren't they? Like lovely to hold.
They're really lovely. And that's the thing, it's a really lovely physical thing. They go on this weird kind of pressure plate thing, but the way it works is it's got a little like, I think it's NFC or something like that. It's a little chip in them.
Oh, yeah.
Which means basically before you put something on, you put it on a little thing to scan it, to kind of like, you put it near a thing so it verifies what it is.
Animal, yeah.
You go, I'm putting a shark on, all right? And then he goes, okay, you're putting a shark on.
That, yeah.
Then you balance it on. And then they're all such weird shapes that you end up with this weird, colourful tower of mishmash stuff.
Yeah.
And it has strange modifiers like that you put on a thing and then it gives you more points, but then you have to do something on the iPad whilst you're doing it with the other hand, which has some fun, kind of stupid, like... Basically, you realise it's quite hard trying to balance something on a tower with one hand. There's a bunch of different things going on. It's interesting. When I first saw it, it was just this mad concept item. I'd never seen anything like it before, and it really piqued my interest. They've been working on it more. They've ironed out some stuff. They've clearly, they've only recently in September, I think, taken the decision to make it primarily kind of a kind of co-op fun party / family thing. Huh. So it's like collaborative Jenga with animals and fish.
Yeah.
And as you say, when you put things on it, then it'll go, oh, well, that was a shark, so there's a shark on the iPad now. And then it'll have this thing of being like, you can then merge the animals together. So you can be like, let's combine the shark with the eagle. And you might get a flying shark, or you might get a swimming eagle shark thing. And then you get more points.
That sounds like something you'd find in ARK.
Yeah, but it has this strange element of being like, you have to like merge the animals to get more points, but then it has this weird thing of...
So you've got like combos, literal combos.
You have literal combos, but then what happens is the shark and the eagle, they still exist. There's less of them now. But then you have this weird thing of like, to keep the ecosystem up, you need to keep all of the animals happy, which means you have these modifier weird shapes that you put on to keep different animals happy. So it's like there's kind of an element of strategy as well.
Like
being
resources.
Like, yeah, so it's like a physical strategy game in a weird way now, of being like a physical collaborative strategy game of you having to be like, well, we need to make the sharks happy because otherwise they're going to die out. It's a weird kind of alternate reality in which the fabulousness rating of an animal determines both the point value and whether or not it's still alive. It's amazing. Like if an animal stops being... It gets to a point where like if an animal gets like 1, it means like it's on the verge of extinction just because it's jealous of other animals being more fabulous.
Oh my goodness.
It's like the history of life on Earth reimagined by Sex and the City. It's like, oh, I can't live anymore. The sharks are way too fabulous.
More like school, just like I will die of jealousy from like...
Yeah, it is. And it's kind of bizarre. And I was talking to the designers today, and it was kind of like this weird thing of, because I was familiar with the game and I knew how it worked, and I just started playing it straight away. I was almost like, this needs something a bit more to it. Like, it needs like some modes. It needs some reason to keep playing again and again and doing different things. Maybe you're trying to achieve different things.
Yeah.
But that's only because really I forgot that really a big challenge of it is it's such a strange and alien game to play in many regards that initially having something very simple is very important. But anyway,
if you're trying to set up different biomes with it or something.
Precisely. I think there's a real scope for just having like some sort of like, because it is kind of half on the iPad and half on this physical tower with these fun, colourful things of either having some sort of meta game outside of it whereby like every time you make a creature it adds it to this ecosystem, and then every time you make that creature again it makes more of the ecosystem. Even if it's just when you boot up the app, it has a little world of creatures that you can like level up somehow. I mean, this is all just me having ideas rather than what they're doing, but they do have plans, and basically what they've got physically is a very fascinating and quirky, colourful tabletop kind of electronic game, which they're putting on Kickstarter with the hope of
Oh, awesome.
Of having stretch goals to do more interesting things with it digitally or whatever. So I actually don't know the details of the
I'll take
Kickstarter.
a proper look, actually, because I remember it really did stick out to me at Res, but I just couldn't really justify spending time on it because I was there for RPS, and it was like, is this a PC game thing? No, it isn't. So let me just touch the animals for a moment, and then now I leave. That sounded a lot worse than it was supposed to. Although actually it came up the other day for the weirdest reason. I was tweeting trying to get a government petition going to bring back pyramids. Do you remember them?
Right, yeah.
They were just these chocolate pyramids that had mint fondant in them that Terry's used to make before they doubled down on the chocolate orange industry. So I was tweeting about that, and then somebody tweeted at me to just say, oh, maybe you could use the same technology that they're making Fabulous Beasts with to bring these back into production. And I'm just you have my full attention right now.
Tagging chocolate mint to make a giant chocolate mint pyramid.
So basically that hasn't happened yet, but I'm holding out hope.
It's gonna happen sooner or later, isn't it? But yeah, as I say, I don't really know the details, but Fabulous Beasts is very much at the least worth a look. So yeah, I think I'll put a link on the website. If you go to coolghost.net, when you look at Daft Soul's feed, there'll be a link to what the website is, so you can go and look at that stuff. It's interesting, and actually the funny thing is as a little game, it's a wonderfully colourful and strange little party piece, or if you're a family with young kids, I'm sure they got a lot of enjoyment out of it. As a game outside of that, as a game with a lot of replay value and a lot of detail, it's not quite there. But what's really interesting about it is the fact that really the work that needs to be done on that side is really just within the app. It's just really within working out ways of using this framework to have fun. And I think that what they're trying to do,
you could push that out once you'd figured it out. If someone's got the thing, you can change the game entirely, push out an update for the app and just be
and
use those base pieces and do this instead.
And that's why I think it's worth a look, because it's one of those funny things of actually really once you've got the pieces and once you've got the hardware and once you've got the app, I think
it could develop a meta or an esport, and you just be look, I like patch 2.5, mate. This 2.6 business is not doing it for me. The elephants are OP. I'm not happy.
I've got no idea, but I think what's really nice about it is because they can push out updates via this app. I think really what they're pushing to do is try and get some interest in it via Kickstarter, which they can then use the money and the time to actually then work on updates for the app and updates for things to make it more interesting and make it more varied and actually add to it. But it's kind of a beautiful thing to have, and it's the sort of thing actually, if you're into this sort of thing, having it as a coffee table piece to pop out every now and then and surprise people and make people go, what the fuck is this, is interesting itself. But yeah, it's interesting. I think if it was a board game, if it was a finished piece, I'd be a bit more reticent, maybe slightly, because I'm it's a lovely thing to have, but the fact that it isn't fixed, because it's once the physical prototypes are fixed, that's only really one half of the picture.
I think I'm going to go and read the Kickstarter and remind myself how much of this is in my head and how much of it is the thing that they're actually making.
Yeah, and as I say, I don't know what they're making, I don't know what they're promising, so I have to have a look at that. But it's at the very least, it's absolutely fascinating, so it's well worth a look.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think we'll probably wrap it up there this time for Daft Souls. We won't do any questions this week because I want to go and make some dinner.
Ooh.
And yeah, precisely.
I'm going to hang around for that. Yeah.
We've gone off piece a lot this time, so I'm just going to say I'll be making some leeks and courgettes. Very lovely. I was going to say earlier you were talking a bit about Holby City, and I realised that's not. If you want to read about Holby City and Pip's thoughts on Holby City, you can read about that on Rock Paper Shotgun.
You can. They're finally letting me achieve my life's dream.
How do people go to do that?
It's a thing called the Saturday Supplement, which is where we now write a little bit about pop culture stuff or things that are just happening outside games that we're super interested in or just watch a lot of. And so I'm channeling, years of watching Holby and Casualty into recaps so that I can justify watching those and make it a work.
I'll put a link to that in the podcast description on Cool Ghosts as well. So easy. So it's been a strange podcast. We spent a lot of time talking about daytime TV.
I think it's been good. I think
I've had a lot of fun.
We've added value.
I think there's going to be some people confused, but it's just the way of the world.
They can check it, and it'll be called Daft Souls. They'll know they're in the right place.
I know, right?
We'll get to games eventually.
Anyway, join us next week when we'll be continuing our tax return special with more chat about Midsummer Murders.
Bye.
Bye.